to come. And it's not that I'm waiting, but it doesn't feel from this side. I don't even know what I'm saying, this side, but in here, I suppose, it doesn't feel like I'm talking. I know that sounds odd because we assume that we are talking, so then we assume that other people are talking as well. So that's quite an odd thing to say. That's the way it is. So it also seems like, so sometimes people get really mad with me for the things that I say in these talks, because they assume that it's my opinion. And it's also not my opinion, but again, that's weird to imagine. So since a very young age, maybe like 7, 8, 9, 10, maybe younger than that, we've assumed that we're acting. We've been told by society, by our parents, that we've got to make right choices and that it's our responsibility to live a good life. And we're constantly being told that we've got to choose. We're always being asked by parents, you know, what are you going to do when you grow up? What are you going to choose now? They're constantly reinforcing this idea of choice, that there's somebody inside these bodies choosing. And that's the way it went, and there's nothing wrong or right with that. It's just what happened, and it's just the way that humans seem to have evolved. They believe they are a chooser and doer of action. With this, though, suffering arises. There can be fun in that choice, but mostly it brings suffering. And why does it bring suffering? Because the mind then gets obsessed with choosing correctly and making happiness in the future, choosing the right thing. Because if you choose the wrong cake at the cake store, you might then have 5 minutes of a really shitty cake. So, or whatever it is. That's a small one, but bigger ones you can imagine, like house or your boyfriend, I mean, or your girlfriend, or your children, or your dog, or what else have we got? Cars, careers. You've got to choose the right career to be happy, and the reason that you're not happy is because you haven't chosen the right career, and it's your fault. So that's inwardly what happens. Then externally we play that game as well. They've chosen wrongly. They've chosen to upset me. They've chosen to do a bad thing to me. And this whole mental activity arises about me, my choices, and how I've got to get that right. And so much of suffering, that laying awake at night, that arguing with your partner, arguing with family, is about choice. That one simple concept. But is it true? Do you choose? So we don't think the tree chooses to grow. We're quite happy with the idea that the tree just grows. We're quite happy with the idea that the wind blows. It doesn't choose to blow, it just blows. So rarely we get that angry with the wind. Sometimes we're like, why is it being windy? I just had my hair done. But most of the time we're like, well, it's just blowing, we can't help that. The same with the birds, the dogs, maybe not always animals, but most of the time we assume that they're not in control of things, so we don't think that much about them. But humans, we spend so much time in what I've chosen and they've chosen. We come to the conclusion, okay, we don't choose the way the body works. We've not chosen our looks. Maybe some people in spirituality believe they've chosen their looks, but most people think, okay, the looks I didn't choose, that was genetic. What I'm good and bad at, kind of, I didn't choose, that's sort of genetic. Maybe it's also that I didn't work hard enough at it. We didn't choose the colour of our skin, or how much our hair grows or doesn't grow. What else do we think we didn't choose in the body? We didn't choose our gender, but we do choose action. We do choose our own action. And we are separate from everything else in that choosing. We are independent from everything else. That choice is totally independent from anything else. It's not because of past actions or future actions. It's not because of anything but my choice. I am choosing freely in every moment. That's the assumption. So when somebody says something rude to you, so say if they shout at you or say, "Why did you do that?" sharply, the thought might come that they independently chose that, and that act was separate from everything else and their own choice. Then we start contemplating how they shouldn't say this, why they shouldn't say this, why they're bad for saying that, why it's not fair that they said that, why does this always happen to me, why do people speak to me like this? All these stories can go over one tiny little action. But how can anything be separate from anything else? How can one sentence, "Why would you do that?" be separate from everything that came before? We assume that we have independent choice in that moment and that we're separate. But how can we separate a choice out? Where does a choice start and stop? Did it start when your parents met? Did it start with the genetics? Did it start when the tree fell on your head and gave you a slightly wonky walk or something? I'm looking at trees. There's going to be a lot of trees in that too. It's all going to be about trees. Eventually I'll just about tree, bee, tree. So now we forget.
Didn't it start when the tree fell on
your head? That's the one. Did it start when 5 minutes ago you got stung by the bee and irritation started to arise? Or did it start when you bought a new jacket 2 days ago and that led you to have to take it back that day, or whatever? Where does that assumed independent action come from? Is that possible? Yeah. No, it's just a slide, but it looked quite funny from here as well. Suddenly, yeah. It looked like it jumped to me. So all this worry about what your career is going to be, all this worry about what your partner's going to do, all this worry about what might happen to your kids is based on the idea that you have independent action. And I'm going to make quite a bold statement and say it's been an absolute lie. There is absolutely no independent person, and there's no independent free will. This has been an illusion. This has been the trick of the human, and this has been where humans go into suffering and madness and mental illness, and why they spend hours at night lying in agony worrying about things. Why that's happened for the human is it seems that the language has been part of it, a big part of it. The fact that we can comprehend things in language. And then we've taken that language to be a truth, not just a description of what's happening. We've taken it to be a truth, and we've taken ourselves to be something in that language. We've taken our nature to be something describable, when it's actually the opposite way round, which is going to sound odd if you've never heard this subject before, but describing is actually arising in your nature. Your nature is before or prior to that description. So therefore you can't describe yourself. But we're convinced we can. We're convinced that we can describe our actions, we can describe our body, we can describe our possessions, we can describe our age. We're convinced we can describe ourselves. But actually what you're describing is just a body, which seemingly is moving through time. That's not actually who you are. That was the mistake. There was something there that was there before the body and is there no matter how much the body changes. Whether you think of yourself as a good person, bad person, whether you're 2 years old or 90 years old, whether you have brain damage, and the brain damage could change the action of the body hugely. It could turn somebody that's very friendly into someone that's very grumpy. It could turn someone that's very active into someone that's very lethargic and slow. So it could completely change the personality. But there's something there that's not affected. You know, when you have that feeling like you don't feel like your age, you feel the same age as you were when you were 2 years old. It's because your essence, isn't the body. The body is arising in your essence, and everything else is arising in your essence. But your essence isn't something you can describe, so it makes it incredibly hard to talk about. Well, there's the obsession with choice and what you're choosing. The obsession will just stay in that thinking, more than likely, in that worry and that suffering. When that begins to loosen, it will begin to see that your nature is absolutely free and has always been free, and that suffering was always a dream. It wasn't an actuality. The world can be painful and pleasurable, but the world and what isn't actually suffering. What's suffering is a false idea. Animals do not suffer. Animals experience pain and pleasure, but they do not suffer. They do not lay awake at night worrying about what they're going to be doing in 10 years' time, and will they have enough money in 10 years' time. They experience pain though. If the leg gets broken, it's painful. If the bee is flying against the glass, it's painful. But they don't have this worry about it, because they don't see it as their responsibility to choose correctly and their responsibility to get life right. Life is just happening. You could say that no, that's not. Couldn't say that. Silly thing to say, Lisa. What this is talking about is trying to point back to what's actually happening rather than what you think is happening. I can assure you the thoughts have led you big time astray, and the obsession with choice has been a huge dream. The choice one has just been the juiciest drama. I assure you, all your arguments will be about what the other person has chosen to do to you. There couldn't be an argument about anything else. It could maybe be like feisty conversation, but the arguments are all about what you've chosen to do to me. You shouldn't have done that. Are you sure you are choosing? Are you sure there's somebody in there choosing? Or is this like a film all playing out that's not separate from anything? I can't answer all of this to you. What can happen in these talks is maybe some ideas which you took as truth can sort of fall away or become deconstructed and seem to not be the truth of things. But I can't tell you the truth because you can't say it in words, but the false ideas might get popped. They might not also. You might go away thinking, what a load of bullshit, which is so okay. So the other dynamic of the individual entity is that it thinks that it's got to create its own happiness in the future. With its choice, it's also got to choose happiness for the future. So it's always looking for things that will potentially make it happy in the future. It's always looking to create an ideal world or a perfect situation. And it becomes obsessed with creating this perfect situation. And I'm sure most of you've realised now that there is no perfect situation. There's no perfect situation. Life is constantly in movement, and as soon as you've got the most beautiful flowers and you've thought, wow, they're the most beautiful flowers ever, and you've appreciated their beauty, they'll begin to rot. They'll begin to, so maybe over a few days, dissolve. The situations are always in movement, and you can't ever create this permanent, perfect situation. There can be moments that are really nice, but they will go. that other idea is another part of this entity which keeps spinning, of trying to find that perfect situation. Life is messy and in opposites, and it's not got, I said this a few times this weekend, it's not got this great ending. Everything's going to die. Like, everything that you love so dearly will be lost. I know that we like to dream and pretend that we can make things permanent and that we can hold on to our loved ones, or we might see them in heaven, or we might see them again after the rotting, or there might be something else after the rotting. But it's the destiny of all objects. But what I'm trying to point to is a freedom that's beyond all what's happening in the flow of things. It's beyond the opposites. It's beyond what you have or you don't have. It's not about the perfect situation. There's a freedom that's way beyond that. And it's the birthright of everything. It's not something that I can give you. It's not something you can buy or trade for. It's your nature. It's just you've been dreaming that your nature was this body, that your nature was your actions, that your nature was your car, almost, or what possessions you have. And so you then got lost in this drama of trying to hold on to things and choose correctly. I don't know why that keeps coming out. It's after, with the Course in Miracles. Choose again.
I wish.
So that nature that I'm pointing to, that's free, that's boundless, and isn't suffering, the suffering is arising in it, but there's something here that isn't suffering, is always present and always with you, no matter what's appearing, whether it be jail, whether it be car crash, whether it be a wedding or a beautiful sunset, it's always there. I'm kind of separating out a bit in what I'm saying. It's really hard to point to. So this thing that I'm trying to point to is always there. It's always been there, no matter what's come and gone, no matter what's appeared and disappeared. And this is the weird bit. It's everything and nothing. It's been everything that's ever appeared. It's not a personal thing. It's not about you choosing. It's not a thought. It's not an action. Yet, I'm so sorry that I can't put this simpler. It is all of that as well. And it doesn't start or stop anywhere. It's not inside your body. It's not something that began when your body began. It's everywhere. Some people call it consciousness. Some people call it aliveness, awareness, Amness. What else do they call it? God. They call it lots of different things. Spirit, maybe. Yeah. I tend to like aliveness, amness I quite like, this amness that's always here, no matter what you think, no matter what you feel. But all those thinking and feeling and actions are it as well. And it's empty, it's absolutely empty amness, and it's full at the same time. There's not a you there at the back of it. What the personal entity does, though, is always focusing on choice, on where I'm going. It's continuously focusing on time and thinking and rights and wrongs and goods and bad. But where's that coming from? What's it arising in? You might have heard of some speakers that when they're talking about this, they present it as being in the moment or something, or it's about the moment or the present. That's not quite what I'm talking about, but I get a sense of what they're trying to point to. They're trying to point to something that's here, but it's not about you being in the moment. It's not about you, because who is you? Who is that you? And how would someone be in the moment? So it's not quite about that, but I understand that they're trying to point back to what's actually here. Well, that was the introduction then. And I know it really seems like it was my introduction. I mean, that's how we'd describe it. Lisa's body spoke, and you sat there and listened. But are you sure that hearing and the heard are separate? That seeing and the seen are separate? I mean, where does your hearing start and stop? And where does if there was no, and where the same with seeing? I mean, if there was nothing to see, would there be any seeing? It is. I need to just go like that, to try and get away with it. Yeah.